Well, hello everybody. This is Pastor Gene, and I am bringing you this message today. But I've got Lin Bradley, who is one of our trustees and the chair of our COVID response team, and we're gonna talk with you a little bit today about some very important information that I think will be very helpful to you and to the church going forward. But before I get started, as we try to do everything in the life of the church, we want to have a biblical basis of what we do. And so I want to just point out that there are about 6 very important scriptures that talk about loving your neighbor. And Jesus talks about this in Matthew 7:12 and in Luke 6:31. And of course, we know those passages go to the golden rule about doing unto others as you have them do unto you. There's biblical law in Leviticus 19:18 that talks about loving your neighbor. And then Paul over in Galatians and Romans, he speaks straight to the importance of loving one another and that being a part of what all we do. And that involves taking care of one another. And James, in chapter 2 of that epistle, talks about how important it is for us to love one another and to take care of one another. And it's this taking care of one another and loving one another that we as a church try to do. Now, Lin, your background growing up, did you tell me was Baptist? Did you have some, what was?
Well, it was a 2-stage approach. I actually went to a parochial school, went to a Catholic school, and from the Catholic school, my parents were Baptist, and I had to do dual service. I was an altar boy. I went to Mass at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then by 9 o'clock I was back home, and 10 o'clock I went to the Baptist church from 10 o'clock until noon.
So you are well versed in those traditions, absolutely no doubt about it. Your pastor doesn't have such an experience as that. I am what they call a high horse Methodist. I have never been in anything but Methodist or United Methodist. When I was 10 years old, the church became the United Methodist Church. But all of my life, I've been well rooted in United Methodist theology and practice. And part of that involves an understanding of the 3 general rules that all people called Methodists are called to follow. So whether you came into the United Methodist Church through a Baptist channel or a Catholic channel or a Presbyterian channel or a Episcopal, whatever channel you came through, there are 3 rules that United Methodists practice or try to practice and live by. And this has been a part of our heritage since 1784 when we first were formed on this continent. And they're really simple. They're really simple rules to remember. And I think, Lin, and we're going to get into this in a minute, I think the COVID response team, and from what I've seen since arriving at Seaside, I think the COVID response team has been following these rules to the T. Let me tell you what they are. First, do good. Again, that goes to the kinds of scripture verses I was talking about at the beginning. You know, you love your neighbor. You do good. You try to do good to all. Do no harm. You try not to harm anybody by what you say or what you do. And third, you attend all the ordinances of God. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means you have public worship. That means you have ministry of the word by being expounded. That means you have communion. You have family and private prayer. You search the scriptures and you practice fasting and abstinence. I probably need to practice the fasting a little bit more often than I do. There may be others out there watching today who feel like they need to do the same thing. But these are the general rules of the church. And these are the things that pastors not only practice, but expect lay people to do in being United Methodist Christians. Now, Lin, I'm going to read the last paragraph in the Book of Discipline after the general rules appear. And I want everybody to get a feel for this, because our conversation going forward is going to be reflective of these general rules. This is the closing paragraph. It said, and this is Mr. Wesley writing, "These are the general rules of our society, all of which we are taught of God to observe, even in his written word, which is the only rule and the sufficient rule, both of our faith and practice." That's kind of what I've been saying. "And all these we know his Spirit writes on truly awakened hearts. If there be any among us who observe them not, who habitually break any of them, let it be known unto them who watch over that soul, as they who must give an account. We will admonish him of the error of his ways. We will bear with him for a season. But then, if he repent not, he hath no more place among us. We have delivered our own souls." These are pretty strong words, but if you do good, do no harm, and attend to the ordinances of God, what's to worry? I mean, what's the problem? Now, Lynn, we've been doing a whole lot of things with the COVID response team. Tell us, in your own words, how you feel we're living up to some of these general rules of doing good, doing no harm, and attending the ordinances of God.
Well, I think the composition of the response team has been good from day one. We've got a collection of experience on the team. We've got trustees on the team. We've got safety advisors. We have a health advisor on the team, and we have some staff members on the team. And of course, we've got some volunteers. By way of background, my background was in risk management. I worked for a large company and did lots of health and hazard risk management assessments to identify, and I thought I could be a big help. And I was asked to do this, and I think that the team is doing an excellent job in ensuring that the health goes to the extent that we do good and that we do no harm to our congregation. Our whole intent and our general principles have been to follow the guidelines, the CDC guidelines, and the North Carolina Department of Health Services guidelines, to make sure that we were minimizing all of the risks that would be associated with COVID. And thus far, I think we've done an excellent job in doing just that and bringing no harm to our congregation.
I would have to agree. And what a lot of you, for those of you who may be watching who are not associated with Seaside and maybe who don't know what has gone on, churches across across the country. Had shut down back in March. Were not meeting and this sort of thing. Each congregation was handling it in a different way, trying to do good, do no harm, and get back into worship when, because that's the third one of these general rules, get back into worship when it was thought to be healthy and safe. And actually, before I even moved to Seaside, I went and met with you in your home.
Yes.
And we talked a little bit about where things were at Seaside, and then ever since I arrived in June, we've been having conversations and taking steps. We got disappointed because in the original plan we were supposed to open earlier, but that kind of got put on hold for us, didn't it?
Our first plan to go to open worship, in-person worship, was July 5th. And I believe that was shortly after you joined Seaside. And then after that was postponed, and that was mostly because one of our guiding principles was that we were going to follow the phase 3 start date that North Carolina government had established, and that date was postponed. It was initially thought that we were going to do that by July 5th, which would have been our start date. Our second date was August 2nd. We intended of having services then. But at the last minute, that Friday before the services, the governor extended and went to a 2.5. We have since revisited the thought process. We did a survey toward the end of August to identify whether or not we would have people who would come back and be part of the worship service. And we got a great response.
Yes, we
and
did.
we developed a startup plan for October 4th. And we held two services, our 9 o'clock and 11 o'clock service. And the big part of that was coming up with the volunteers that we needed to ensure that we had a safe environment. And that safe environment meant that after the 9 o'clock service, we would be required to clean the sanctuary to ensure that it had been disinfected and cleaned from the 9 o'clock congregation. Following that 11 o'clock service, then we would clean the following week. We were able to put that in practice with ample volunteers, and it worked very well. Unfortunately, we've not been able to get the third service in place. We have a shortage of volunteers at this point, and we're just now trying to identify additional volunteers to help us with that third service. We would very much like to go back to the 8 a.m. service, the 9:30 service, and the 11 o'clock service. But until we have ample volunteers to ensure that we have a safe environment, we need to make sure that we have the people who can do this on a regular basis.
And interestingly enough, just before we sat down to make this video, we got a being on the phone that said that the survey that is going to help us get these volunteers has just gone out. So we want to encourage all of you to not just watch this video and learn about that, but to go and to complete that survey just as quickly as possible. I think the due date on it is October the 23rd. And then as soon as we collect that data, we can begin moving towards going back to 3 services as soon as we have those people. But we're going to do good, we're going to do no harm, and we're going to attend to the ordinances of God in a healthy and safe way. Now, Lin, there's another issue that we probably need to speak to everybody about, and that is now that we're back having public services of worship, there may be somebody who comes along and tests positive for COVID. Now, that's the reason we're having people sign in, so we as a congregation know who to contact in the event that takes place. I'll speak first to this, and then I want you to make some other comments and correct me if I'm wrong. But this is not a matter where we're going to give the name of the person to the whole world, because this is a medical confidence, and we will treat it as a pastoral confidence. We will notify the people who have signed in that this has occurred, and we would encourage everyone to follow healthy and safe practices. If you're feeling symptoms, whether you come to worship or not, you need to be aware of your own health and be in touch with your own physician and get the tests that you need to get. But understand that we respect everybody, and that the clergy will not divulge anything that we consider as a pastoral confidence under any circumstance. Other comments you want to make about that, Lin? Did I get it?
Yes, I think
Right.
I think it's good. I want the congregation to understand that we're following all of the risk mitigations necessary, but that does not give us a guarantee. It is not 100% guarantee that's going to prevent someone from contracting the virus. We're asking people to wear masks, we're asking people to social distance, and we're also cleaning the environment to ensure that we have a safe environment. But that does not guarantee that something outside of the church environment would contribute to someone contracting the virus. And that is a very likelihood. And that's the reason why we need to make sure we understand all the surrounding information when a person does contact the church to let us know that they have actually been told that they have turned up positive or they have been in touch with someone, we just simply want to make sure that we communicate that information to you so that you can take the proper care necessary to protect yourself. This goes along with doing good and doing no harm. We want to make sure that you are communicated the information you need to make those choices.
And we hope that this time has given you some insight as to what the work of the COVID response team has been. And Lin, on behalf of all of us, I want to thank you, and I want to thank the whole team, and I want to thank the whole congregation. We have been working very hard, especially, to do good and to do no harm. That's one thing, but we've been working very hard on attending to the ordinances of God. We've gotten back into public worship. The opportunity is there for people to be involved in public worship. The ministry of the word is being delivered every single day in this parish via the sunrise to sunset, and then of course the YouTube transmission of worship services on Sunday. So every day we're doing that. We've got a process for communion. We always encourage family and private prayer and the searching of the scriptures. One final thought though, when people do come into the building here at Seaside and they are in meetings and they do use buildings, you will notice that there's some spray bottles and cloths to spray and wipe down. We want you to use those. There's a card inside of each of those baskets giving you instructions on what to do so that we can do good, do no harm. And as Reuben Job translates this last point of the general rules, he says, stay in love with God. And I would add, stay in love with one another. Lin, thank you so much for coming in today and making this video and helping our people. Any closing thoughts?
Yes, I would like to thank you, Pastor Gene. This has not been an easy time for you to transition into Seaside. And I, along with many of the members of Seaside, want to say just a word of appreciation. We know how difficult the times have been, and we thank you for your presence and for your judgment and for your guidance. I think with all of those thoughts and with your involvement, I think we're on the road to being getting back to the church that we would like to be. And we thank you for that.
Well, heartfelt appreciation and gratitude for that comment. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.